What nefarious hijinks were the searchers of the 1999 discovery of George Mallory on Mount Everest up to anyway? Did they hide evidence? Are they keeping things to themselves for their own profit? Do they hold further answers to the mystery of Mallory and Irvine? Enough to answer the question of whether Mallory and Irvine were the first to stand on the summit of the world's highest mountain in 1924? No, sorry guys, nothing nefarious. Greetings and thank you for taking time to stop by. Welcome to my channel. Believe me, as far as I know, there is nothing, not a single thing known or being held back for personal profit by any of us, any of the 6 individuals who searched the site where British expedition and mountaineering icon George Mallory lay. That would add to the arsenal of information necessary to solve the enduring mystery of Mallory and Irvine. Before we get to my interview with my friend Jochen Hemmleb, if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and comment, and look into becoming a member of the channel. You can check it out by clicking on that little join button underneath this video. Either way, thanks for being here and thank you for watching. Without the work of my guest today, Jochen Hemmleb, it's very fair to assume that the body of George Leigh Mallory would not have been discovered that day, or ever again since, for that matter. And despite what appear to be facts behind there having been multiple sightings of both Mallory and Irvine in the years previous to 1999, those sightings would very likely not have been known to the world at large, or to any of us watching this video, without the research and publications of Jochen Hemmleb. That's just a fact. Plain and simple, the Chinese were not and are not interested in talking about or publicizing anything whatsoever about Mallory or Irvine or sightings or artifacts or whether they made it or whether they didn't make it. It's actually more likely that they have made efforts to quash information about previous sightings. In this interview that I'm going to share with you today, I asked Jochen a few questions about the artifacts that were removed from the site where Mallory lay, all to the permission of the Mallory and Irvine families. No renegades, no body robbers, no grave robbers. People given full permission to go do what we did in the deepest respect possible. So in this interview, I asked Jochen a few questions about the artifacts removed from the site where Mallory lay, the documentation of those artifacts, and if any of those artifacts had knowingly or unknowingly ever gone missing or lost from between the time of the discovery to getting back down to base camp on Everest, and then ultimately home to the museums or back to family and the like where they are today. So here's Jochen Hemmleb, the world's foremost authority on all things Mallory and Irvine. He's an author, researcher, climber, storyteller, and his books, Ghosts of Everest and Detectives on Everest, are absolute must-reads for any who want to learn more about the mystery of Mallory and Irvine. Here's my interview with Jochen. Enjoy. We had talked, Jochen, about the artifacts and the documenting of the artifacts, and if everything that was on George Mallory's body on the May 1st discovery actually, one, got down to base camp, and if it did and when it did, how you documented it. And I'd love to hear about that, because I think some people, one, they can't even picture in their mind what it is we found on him until I posted a video recently that showed a piece of the rope, a handkerchief, the meat lozenges in his pocket. I'd love to hear what your process was to document that and be as straight and clean, if you will, scientific as possible.
Yeah, I mean, for me it was a fairly straight story. I mean, I witnessed the discovery in a sense by telescope and over the radio. I didn't learn what was actually found until 2 days later, but I mean, that evening of May 1st, when Dave Hahn in his last radio call from Camp 5 said, "Jochen, you are going to be a happy man," that was when I knew something big had been found. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was big, and I sensed this already because I had watched the team over the telescope, and I saw they were gathered in one place for nearly 3 hours, and so something was on. And then I got word that it was Mallory who was found. And then a day later, the whole search team came down to base camp. And we had this really, really memorable evening when everything that was brought down from the mountain was spread out on the table at base camp. And it was fresh from the mountain. It was unsorted. It was just in the bags that the search team had used to collect everything. And I mean, the first impressions were really, really moving. I mean, you saw the clothing, and I will never forget the smell of Mallory's clothing. And this organic smell, that was really almost turned Mallory alive again for me, because now I could associate even a smell with him. And then there were the various items, the snow goggles, the altimeter, the name tags, and the clothing, all so poignant. And immediately the day after, I started sorting those items, spreading out the clothing, identifying the various layers, and how much was actually taken down from each layer. And you could really figure that out pretty much by spreading out on the table. And you were along during that time, and you took a couple of photographs of me doing all this kind of investigation and documentation. And so there were various stages of documentation, of course, photographs, and then also verbal description. So that gives pretty much a chain of evidence, so to say. We have pretty much an idea what was recovered and what state it was. Then once the clothing and everything had been sorted, it was wrapped up and packed individually in Ziploc bags with silica gel for drying out. So at that point, we had pretty much an established log, what was recovered, what was actually on the table, and by inference also what was not found. And the artifact log I produced in the end was the summary, the final result, when everything that I had packed up and personally packed up and logged at base camp was unpacked again at the Washington State Historical Society in Seattle, Tacoma actually, and we investigated the artifacts again with a professional archaeologist, Rick Rainier. And then we did a second set of photographs, laboratory photographs. So when the artifacts were cleaned, they were put on a table, on a copy stand, black background, scale bar, and everything. So I have two complete sets of artifact photos from Mallory. One that is the base camp state, how the artifacts were when they came back from the mountain, and one set of laboratory photographs that is how they were eventually handed over to both the family and the Royal Geographical Society, and the collection of Mallory papers that were the three entities where the artifacts ended up.
That's really interesting to hear about how that all went down and to be reminded of it as well in base camp. If I could have you back it up a little bit, I probably should have asked this before what you just told me, but you created a search guide and it was a manual, a search manual that all the guys on the team got. They were handed their own copy of it. I think it was either 8 or 10 pages or something. And they were
and
bound.
I probably produced 5 copies or so of it. And
I have one, and it's right behind me over there. I think I've photographed it, and I might have shared it with Mark Sinnott, and that's the only person who's ever seen it outside of this, and just before our 2019 expedition. But your coordinates, the search zone that you mapped out, although Mallory was found a little bit outside of it, I consider that the definitive structure for what gave to the situation wherein he was discovered. And could you explain a little bit about what went into that zone and how it came to be? And I think it's most people know, but there might be some who would be truly curious to find out.
I mean, the research manual was pretty much abridged sort of cheat sheet summary of what could be delineated about the search zone at the time. And the essential 2 points of reference were, first of all, the ice axe up on the Northeast Ridge found in 1933, and the position of the Chinese Camp 6 from where Wang Hongbao found the English dead. And essentially, you could say, yeah, there is a line that could be drawn, a traverse line from that Chinese camp, and you have the fall line from the ice axe, and that gave some sort of center for the search area. But because we couldn't really know if the ice axe and the English dead were really related, I qualified this information a bit, and I did that in additional writing that we also discussed at base camp. There is some video footage in the BBC documentary about the 99 expedition where Eric Simonson is actually reading from my paper, not from the research manual. And the qualification of the information was, we cannot be sure if the body is really in the fall line from the ice axe. So let's propose this kind of radius around the 1975 Chinese camp. And I think I had a radius of about 140 or 150 meters around that camp, because that seemed to be about the distance that could be covered in 20 minutes. The time that Wang Hongbao apparently spent outside the tent. And as it turned out, Mallory's position is about 140 meters away from the Chinese camp. What I didn't like after the 99 trip was that so much was debated about where was the search zone, and was Conrad outside the search area, and so on and so on. There was a lot of bullshit that was actually distributed at the time. The thing is, no one, not myself, not anybody else, could determine the exact location of the body, only a zone. And what I was certain about was, once the search team was up there, it was pretty much up to them. And I stated that in many interviews and also in my book. My job was to give them a general sense of direction and some sort of help, some orientation, but it was pretty much up to them. And as it turned out, everybody of the search team was more or less following their own intuitions. And as it happened, Conrad was right. But I mean, that doesn't mean that the other guys were wrong. They were just perceiving different scenarios and followed them through like Andy Pollitz, who believed that Mallory and Irvine might have come down the lower part of the yellow band and ended up in those gullies leading into the snow terrace. So he went up there and looked at, you can't say that Andy was wrong. He was just following a different perception and a different idea. And so everybody could have been right in some sort of way. And in the end, it was pretty much superfluous to have that debate who was right or who was wrong. I mean, to go up there and do a search, I mean, I have to give so much credit to the whole search team still now, nearly 25 years after. And that was splendid. And I did my little part in all of this. And yeah, it was a community effort, and that's how I like to see it.
That's perfectly said. And so on that morning of the search, there was a radio call at 5 a.m. sharp. I remember filming. I was standing about 2 feet from Dave Hahn on the radio with you, and you were wishing them luck. And can you explain to me a little bit about how that felt when the discovery was made?
Well, first of all, I like that video sequence you took of Dave, because it showed so much of Dave's humor. When I asked them, did you have a good night's sleep? And he said, negative, we didn't come here to sleep, we came to climb and search. So that was typical Dave. And when they made the discovery, I mean, that was really, really an amazing moment. Because at first, to just see the search team spreading out there and taking a look around gave me the feeling, hey, we've achieved so much already, because that was the first time ever somebody went in that area of the mountain to search. And to see them doing that was just incredible. And then came the call in that Jake had found this blue oxygen bottle from the Chinese in 75. And that, of course, gave a sense that, yeah, the camp must be nearby. The search team never found the Chinese camp. That was found only 2 years later by our 2001 expedition, but they were in the right area, and that, of course, made it all very, very exciting. But never ever could we have imagined that we would make the big discovery. And when Conrad's call came the last time I climbed the boulder problem in hobnailed boots, I fell off. I mean, nobody got it, but I can recall a few minutes went past, and I was sitting there, and I looked at Liesel and Ned, our film crew, and I said, hang on, he mentioned boulder. That was the code word. Does this mean something? I mean, did he really make the discovery right now? He said boulder, for God's sake. Yeah, and then came the other calls, come down for tea and Snickers and mandatory group meeting. And it was not that anyone realized what was going on there, but there was this sense of anticipation. And then, yeah, they
incredible.
They waited. They were in that one place for 2 hours and more, and I just could be there behind the telescope and watch them and ask myself, hey, what's going on there? And
yeah. So Jochen, everything, as far as you know, is everything that was originally found and not left at the site, did it all come back down? There have been some mention that perhaps something got lost or left. I don't know if there was a crystal on the altimeter. I wasn't aware of that until somebody mentioned that recently. Where if he had a full pair of gloves, and I know that there were goggles that were in his pocket, but he had two before he left.
I can only recount what I saw on the table 3 days later, and I can recall the testimonies. And as far as any gloves were concerned, there was never any mentioning that 2 gloves were found, only one in the pocket. The crystal of the altimeter was missing, as were the hand of the altimeter. We know about the watch, that the hour hand was present in the first first hours after the discovery and after the recovery, and you took a photo of the hour hand at Camp 5, and that was later lost during the transport. There was no mentioning that any broken glass from the watch crystal was found in the pockets. But I can only recount the testimony by every search team member and what I had on the table after the search, and that is documented. I have it in writing, and that writing is back from 1999.
Do you feel as though I made a comment about this recently, that while the Mallory and Irvine mystery was indeed fascinating to a lot of people, I feel like the 1999 expedition, whether the people up there were prepared or not, or professionally trained for such an experience or not, which we weren't, I can't envision that this would be such a phenomenon now, that the mystery of Mallory and Irvine, it feels like an industry almost. So many people are intrigued by it, and I really feel like it was the 1999 expedition that did it. And I don't believe that the effort would have gone forward to find him had that not happened. I mean, perhaps you would have found time a year later or 2 or 3 years later, but that discovery, whether the people were trained in archaeology or what have you or not, we're not having this conversation today, and the thousands of videos and the hundreds of thousands, it just doesn't exist.
Not at all. And it was the nucleus for that. And I still find it amazing that it is going on 25 years later. And in a sense, it's wonderful, because the mystery is so much alive that way. And what I still find fascinating is we found a lot, but we learned not such a lot, because we still have no hard evidence about what happened to Mallory and Irvine above the first step, except for Noel Odell's sighting, but that is not hard evidence, and it's still vividly discussed. Yeah, but above, it's like if the mountain is cut off. It's above the first step. There's no hard evidence, no clear knowledge what happened to them, and people can talk about it until they are blue in the face. It doesn't change a thing. And fact is, the Mallory and Irvine mystery will not be solved behind a computer or behind a desk. It still needs boots on the mountain, or maybe in modern times, high-tech drone or something like that. But the evidence, if it is anywhere, it's up on the mountain.
Everest is merely a portal to bring people together as a community. I know how interested everybody here is, still watching at this point, in the mystery of Mallory and Irvine, in solving it. My goal is to foster kindness and community and understanding of differing opinions in the search for truth, and also with the temperament that I'm more than willing to be wrong about any ideas I might have ever had about them possibly not making it, because I actually lean in that direction. I very well could be wrong, but I also might be right, because nobody really knows. Some also, on another topic, ask if they might see photographs that I took that day on the 16th of May, 1999, and those are forthcoming. I'm working on something now wherein all of those questions will be answered. I've got some beautiful photographs and a great project coming up, hopefully in the next several months, including a book that I'm putting together that includes a full description and debrief of everything of my experience on not only the 1999 expedition, but the 2019 expedition to look for the body of Sandy Irvine. So thank you for being here. Subscribe, like, comment, share, become a member if you want some inside information on the mystery of Mallory and Irvine and other topics that I'll be sharing with you. I appreciate you being here. Thanks very much. I love you. Have a blessed day.